Hey guys, I was reading Exodus chapter 3 today about Moses and the burning bush. You probably already know that story where Moses is in the wilderness. He's shepherding his father-in-law's flock and he sees a burning bush. It's on fire, but it's not consumed. And in Exodus 3 verse 3, it says that he turned aside to see why the bush wasn't burning. But what really stood out to me was verse 4. Verse 4 says that when the Lord saw Moses had turned aside, he called to him from the middle of the bush and said, "Moses, Moses." And Moses replied, "Here I am." And I thought, that's really interesting. Before the Lord could speak to Moses, God wanted action to be taken by Moses first. Moses had to turn aside to seek God. So he took action based on what he saw. And why would he turn aside in the first place? Well, because the bush was not consumed. It was on fire, but it wasn't burning up. It was a very peculiar sight, and it made him stop and wonder what was going on. He wanted to investigate and check it out. And sometimes that's how it is in life. There's something that's going on. There's an event that takes place. There's a situation we find ourselves in, and we are questioning in our life, what is going on? We have to look further because it doesn't make sense. At the end of verse 4, God calls his name. And so once action was taken by Moses, then God responds to Moses. Sometimes we're waiting to hear something from God, and God's just waiting for us to move. He wants us to turn and look. And so notice also that God didn't say, "Hey," right? He said, "Moses, Moses." He called his name. And that's how God does to us. He's very personal, and he calls us by our name. And so once again, after he does that, it says that Moses had to respond. At the end of verse 4, Moses replies and says, "Here I am." Are you willing to respond when God calls your name? When he is speaking to you, are you willing and ready with your heart to tell him that you are ready to be obedient to what he is calling you to do? It's very important. And if you keep reading the rest of these verses, it's really neat how God then gives Moses additional details. He tells him, "I've seen the oppression of the people. I'm aware of their suffering, but I want you to go to Pharaoh and lead my people out of Egypt." It's a process, and it begins with taking a closer look. It begins with turning aside, with seeking the Lord, just like Moses did. And sometimes in the busyness of life, that's really hard to do. But it's very important that we take that time. Moses replies to God and he says, "Here I am." And I think that's so very important that sometimes when we are feeling that conviction from the Lord or we're hearing him speak to our hearts, we can hear it and then go on about our day or go on about our life. But Moses took the time to respond. He gave the Lord his undivided attention, and he also gave him that commitment. "I'm here, I'm listening. I'm listening to what you have to say to me." And if you keep reading down through the verses, God then gives more details to Moses. And he tells him, "I've seen the oppression of the people. I'm aware of their suffering, but I want you to go to Pharaoh and lead my people out of Egypt." It's a process. It's a huge process. And it begins with seeking the Lord, with turning aside and giving him your attention and listening to him, taking that closer look when he's trying to get your attention. Is that what he's doing for you? And are you paying attention? Are you listening? Be ready to respond like Moses and say, "Here I am, Lord."